Hi, everyone. Welcome to Embodied Enlightenment. I am Carrie Merriam. Thank you so much for being here. And who we have across from us is Jason Prall, an incredible individual. He is a former mechanical engineer turned entrepreneur, filmmaker, and health optimization practitioner. Due to 20 years of his own health challenges, Jason was given the opportunity to discover the reality behind his symptoms. Over the years, he's transitioned from working in integrative disease care model to a model of health optimization and lifestyle medicine. Ooh, that's a lot to say. Jason, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And today we're talking about the evolution of cells and how that truly influences the evolution of self.
Yeah, it's a fascinating way to look at health, and but at the end of the day, I think we have to remember that what we are is just on the biological superficial level, just a bunch of cells, right? So we like to think of ourselves as a human with organs and these systems that seem to have been separated throughout a lot of the medical sciences and in biology class, right? But at the end of the day, every organ, every tissue that we have is a specialized cell that's carrying out a function. And so, when you start thinking about this on that level, you start to realize how miraculous it all is. How the heck does a cell create a unique function, but also work with neighboring cells in that same organ or tissue to collectively carry out a function, and also work in the collective of the human amongst trillions of cells and other organisms that make us up. So there's so much going on at the microscopic level that carry out function in ways that we can't even imagine. So it gets quite overwhelming to some degree, but at the end of the day, I think if you just start to tap into the power that we have over the cell, then the cell can create the self, as you mentioned.
And the power that we have over the cell, my belief is that primarily comes from our thought patterns.
It's absolutely. I think you kind of get into these weird philosophical feedback loops that come from, first of all, what is a thought, right? And what is an emotion, and where does it come from? And how do we even start to understand that process? And I don't think we fully understand that yet. But the science that we understand now is bearing this out, that the emotion and the thoughts do influence us at a fundamental level. Not only what we would consider us, which is the cells that make us up, but also the organisms that are within us, right? We have to remember that we are actually mostly virus and bacteria and parasites and all these other organisms. They comprise who we are in a much greater way than even us. So we have to recognize, I think, first, that we are a walking, talking rainforest. We are an ecosystem of life that is all working in conjunction together to carry out function and to experience this existence. And so our thoughts, our emotions influence those organisms and influence the cells that we would consider us. And I don't know that we fully understand how yet, but with researchers like Bruce Lipton and many others, to be honest, we are starting to understand some of the mechanisms, I think, by which how this actually carries forth. So we have things like water, right? We now know that water has the capacity to store information and carry information. And we are, of course, mostly water, right? So one has to ask ourselves, why are we mostly water? And then the next step is, we are not this water that you might think of that comes out of the faucet. We have a fourth phase of water, right? This is something they don't teach us in physics and biology yet, but it is being studied and is being taught at higher levels in some universities around the world. And the research is there that there is this fourth phase, this crystalline matrix of water that occurs when you get water up against what's called a hydrophilic surface, basically a water-loving surface. Well, it turns out most of our body, the proteins and everything that's within us at the cellular level, is a hydrophilic surface. So it's a water-loving surface. Now, when you put this water up against this water-loving surface and you have light that interacts with this water, you actually get this charge separation, this electrical separation. The water actually turns into this crystalline matrix, forms a battery, and actually transmits and stores energy. So there's a number of ways that we can start to look at this and hypothesize and start to think about how information in the form of thought or emotion might influence cells through DNA, through water, and through the matrix that is always there, right? So it's crazy complex, and we don't necessarily understand exactly the mechanisms, but the biophysics and the water sciences and our understanding of DNA, this is starting to bear out some pretty magical properties that happen inside the body. And then, we can also just go to experience, right? And I think most of us have an experience that would suggest that our belief, our thought patterns, our emotions have an effect on us that go beyond just the hormonal explanations, I think, that many people try to assign.
And what's so fascinating about what you just said, and by the way, every time I talk to you, I feel like my mind is just completely blown. So I'm just in such a state of appreciation. But what's so fascinating about what you just said is even cells that we have taken on from previous generations that come into our body that could be diseased, what some people say. I believe, and I would love you to kind of understand your beliefs in as well, that all of our cells have their own individual consciousness. And just like we as an innate living rainforest, like you call us, are constantly reaching towards the evolution of ourselves, the cells at an individual level are also looking for the evolution expansion of themselves to a place of health and wholeness. But when we come into this time-space continuum that we're in right now in our physical body, and we are provided a belief from a doctor or someone in the medical system that constantly says, well, no, you have cancer, you have this, right? Cells that are fragmented, it automatically signals to the cell to move away towards the optimization of health. What are your thoughts around all of those things that I just said?
I mean, there's so much to unpack, right? I mean, I think, it's very hard when we start talking about consciousness. It's really hard to understand what that is, right? Because on some level, the thing that we call consciousness is trying to understand consciousness and where does that come from. And it's this sort of like feedback loop that you can't really comprehend. But at the end of the day, I think we can draw a conclusion that there's something there, that there's something that is beyond us, that makes us up, that makes up the things that we experience and feel and see and everything that's around us, right? And so sort of this divine matrix, as Greg Braden might refer to it as, right? There's something that's there that is constructing reality as we know it. And I think we have to recognize that it is all connected, and that that space and time are an illusion in the grandest sense, right? And this goes back to a lot of the religious texts and spiritual texts, and even quantum physics and some of the things that we're bearing out now, right? Nassim Haramein talks about this in the holographic way, and holographic type of universe. And so it's hard to understand really what's going on there. The research, if we kind of take various parts of the research in terms of health, we can start to maybe make sense of it and create a picture or story in our minds of what might be going on. We know that Holocaust survivors, when they have children, there is some sort of memory that's being passed down, that's affecting the nervous system and affecting the emotional state of the child. We know that in mouse models, we see this as well, bearing out 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. This sort of trauma that can be passed down. And so I think that there's some mechanisms that are happening, and I don't know exactly how. Is it coming through the mitochondria, which come from mom? Is it coming from the DNA? Is it coming from something else that is not necessarily physical, but is more of an energetic, vibratory essence? That's very possible as well. So we all have to recognize that we are stewing in a sea of conscious creation of energy. Whatever the heck that means to you is you, right? I mean, we all have sort of a different idea. It's like when we say God, what does that mean? Well, it's probably different for everybody, right? So, but there's something there that I think can be passed down. And again, it's this illusion of time. So the science is showing us that this does matter, that things do get stored, that memory, even things like water, some water scientists actually will state that water can hold infinite memory, that there is no limitation to the capacity through which water can store memory. And if you think about water, it's being basically shared globally all the time, right? It goes up in the atmosphere and it comes back down. It goes underground and it comes back up. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. It just keeps moving around, right? So at some point over long enough periods of time from a statistical model, you're going to find that water has been influencing everything and touched everything in all of time, right? So it starts to become this soup of consciousness and memory. And so, it's hard to sort of wrap your head around all this, I think. But what we can say is that there is definitely mechanisms that are occurring that allow for the transfer of information through time that do affect us individually, collectively, and at the microscopic level.
So if an individual is listening right now and they're looking to optimize their health by really understanding what is fragmented at a cellular level, how would you start to steer them in the direction of health?
I mean, I think right now we live in the most chaotic time imaginable. I mean, we are being inundated with information and influence, right? The hyperstimulation that we're experiencing now, I don't think has ever been rivaled. And we have to recognize that that is not a state through which we are accustomed to thriving in, right? So humans are very adaptable. And so I think over time, should we be subjected to this level of inundation over time, we will adapt. But throughout our history, we have not been this stimulated. So we have to sort of unstimulate ourselves, right? This is where things like meditation and yoga and breath work and sleep and walks in nature and all these sort of things come into play. And so I think just engaging some of this behavior to shut things down a little bit from a mind standpoint and from an emotional standpoint, I think that's critical. This is where, we can use nature to our advantage. We know that if we go out in nature, our state changes, our brain waves change, our cells change, everything about us changes when we go out and just experience nature. So let's use that to our advantage. So I think getting back out into nature, calming things down, engaging that sort of parasympathetic side of our nervous system, that rest and digest is a critical practice that we need to engage in, right? If we think about the monks and all these spiritual practitioners that we see throughout history, even they were highly skewed toward the parasympathetic, right? And they lived in a much more serene place and time than we do here in the West. So, it's laughable. It's actually shocking that we can actually deal with all of this, right? There's just so much going on.
Well, even the yoga practices are shifting away from parasympathetic in the West. And
exactly.
Like rigorous, fast-paced, like vinyasa, which I was hooked to, which was the gateway in, but which is why it's creating more fragmentation than it is creating wholeness, serenity.
Exactly. And they're doing weights and all these things. And I don't think this is wrong in a sense of moving, right? I think that's good that we're moving, but I think we also have to recognize that yoga is much more than a movement practice. It's a moving meditation that's moving your own energy, right? So I think we just have to step back into that a little bit. That would be step number one, that if somebody's dealing with any health issues or they feel imbalanced in any way, that's the easiest way to sort of get into that. Now, probably a lot of your listeners are already doing some of this anyway. And so I think, reiterating this idea of affirmation, of confirmation, that health is already there within you. It's like love. A lot of people are looking for love. Well, the love's already there. You just need to recognize that, access it, appreciate it, be grateful for it, right? Like, this is the practice. The practice is recognition that it's already there. Health is already built within you. Love is already there. There is no searching for it. There is no, I'm going to have it next year or tomorrow or anything. Recognize that you are it. It's already there. And so this is the affirmation, this confirmation that it's here, and I'm grateful for it. But if you're not grateful for it, I think that it becomes a difficult thing to recognize. A lot of people would say that gratitude is the sort of highest state of vibration, the sort of highest state that we can achieve is this state of gratitude. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it sounds good to me. And I think every time that I'm in a state of gratitude, like really feeling actually grateful, not just a thought of gratitude, but a feeling of gratitude, this is where I feel most connected, the most balanced. So I think using things like meditation or walking meditation or any of this stuff, but practicing that gratitude, practicing the love, practicing the compassion and the empathy, and giving it back outward to others. I think this is a state through which not only can change your perspective and your spiritual side of things, it can change the physical, right? And I think this is a key aspect. And working with a lot of spiritual people, I wouldn't say it's spiritual bypassing, but I think they forget. They're trying to get out of their body too much. And what I want to do is get them in their body, right? Because
that's what it's all about. It's embodied enlightenment. The spiritual
exactly.
people have to come back into their body.
This is the place that through which you experience the spiritual nature of things, right? It is the body. The body, and by body, I mean body, mind, the whole thing. That is your access point. So if that is sick, if that is imbalanced, if you're fighting with nature on the physical side of yourself, then you're not going to optimize the spiritual side. So I think we have to recognize that we kind of got to get back down into the lower chakras a little bit, heal those so that we can really flow that energy, right? I mean, this is, and at the end of the day, when you feel good, it's so much easier to be grateful. It's so much easier to be in a state of compassion and love, right? If we're constantly at turmoil at the physical side of ourselves, I think, first of all, that's showing us something that's not balanced. But when we start to take that spiritual practice and embody that, and recognize that those things are healing the body too, and be grateful for that. And if you're really good at this, you can focus that energy to wherever you need healing in the body. So just recognize that stuff that we teach in the sort of spiritual side of things is the same thing that's going to help the physical nature of the cell, the organ, and the body, whatever tissue that you're trying to sort of heal from. So whether it's coming out of surgery or it's cancer or it's, hormonal imbalances, it can all be used effectively, right? And this is what the shamans do. This is what Qigong does. This is what a lot of the spiritual practitioners around the world do, is they learn how to focus and harness that energy, recognizing that the health is already there. It's quantized, as we might say in the quantum physics world. It's holographic. It's there. So the access point is your mind, is your emotions, and the practice of meditation and yoga and some of these other things, Qigong, this is the practice of getting into that state through which you can access any of this stuff, right? So I think it's just tying it all together and recognizing that the physical is not a separate entity from the emotional body or the spiritual body.
I think what is so powerful, what of everything that you've said, the biggest takeaway really for me, I mean, there's so many nuggets, but it's the feeling, right? Because the feeling is what is influencing the vibrational expansion to connect you to that deeper innate understanding that's happening from an energetic perspective, to pull you back into the body and really harness that energetic prana, versus the thought, which is the perception of illusion, right?
Absolutely. And HeartMath is probably, they're a fantastic organization that if you want to look at the science behind what you just stated, HeartMath they do some really cool stuff. They are, in essence, they look at the heart that actually has neurons, right? So we think of the brain has neurons, and it has the ability to think and all these things, send electrical signals. Well, the heart actually has more of those. The heart actually can grow new neurons. It has neuronal connections. It has a much bigger magnetic field because there's more mitochondria and there's more electrical activity going on in the heart. So what's interesting is the heart and the brain, heart and the mind, heart and the brain, and the mind is maybe something different, but the heart and the brain, the activity can get synchronized, right? And when we have what's called coherence, in other words, coherence is what happens in physics and in light when it's all on the same wavelength, if you will. That's probably the easiest way to say it. It's all like a laser. A laser is coherent light, whereas like something that comes out of your flashlight is not coherent, right? It kind of sprays everywhere. But a laser is highly focused and coherent. The heart and the brain, when they are in coherence, this is when healing happens. This is when your heart rate variability goes up. This is when amazing things happen from the parasympathetic side of things. And what's crazy is that this is when we start getting into things like the Maharishi effect, when we meditate or we send love to others. If you're familiar with Lynn McTaggart's work on the power of 8, she takes 8 people and they all get into a healing state, if you will, to send healing to another, and they all get healed because of this stuff, right? So the collective power of this heart-brain coherence can influence others. This is what changes the world, right? I mean, this is what the Maharishi effect is showing over and over again, that certain people meditate, a number of people meditate in a location, and send out gratitude and compassion and empathy and all these amazing feelings, it can change the entire planet. We've seen this. So, or it can change a whole city, like we've seen in Washington, D.C. and other places. So this is what's cool, is that the heart-brain coherence, and if you look at what HeartMath is doing and some of the things that they're finding, at the power of this stuff, you can't, if you look at that and go, it's no big deal, or oh, it's just changing me. I think you're missing the big picture, because it's changing everything. And so there's a real power in the heart-brain coherence, and it requires the heart. So I think you're totally correct. Just like all the yogis said thousands of years ago. And this is like old stuff, right? So we got to get into the heart, but we all know this, right? We all trust your heart, right? Trust your gut. There are neuronal connections in the heart and the gut and the brain. So we know this stuff. We just have to tap back into it, understand the power of it. And the science is finally taking us there. It's finally understanding and showing us what's really going on and the power of it. And I think we just have to recognize it. And for me, as a sort of former engineer, science guy that wandered into the sort of spiritual world, it's really cool to see the merger of science and ancient spiritual and traditional practices. This is, to me, where I think my type of brain goes, oh shit, this is really cool. Like I always thought that they were onto something. I kind of figured that they knew what they were talking about. But now science is going, oh wait, we actually are confirming this stuff, right? So the acupuncture and the Chinese med, they all knew this stuff. Like we're just like children figuring it out. But to me, it's really cool to be able to look at both of those equations and marry those up, because it just, for me, provides massive confirmation that this is what you do. This is the practice. This is the way to go. And it's not in this sort of segmented, polarized, weird way that we look at medicine in the West. There's a much greater and effective practice that can be utilized if we just understand what's happening.
I feel the same exact way. Like, what an amazing time to be alive, especially talking to people that geek out on science, right? Right before we launched the podcast, we were having this exact conversation. You're like, oh yeah, exactly what you just said. Go look at this study. It's going to confirm what you're saying. So how epic is that, right?
Well, and one thing I'll mention, just because you just triggered it in me, we actually look at meditation, and we can measure the light that comes out of somebody's skin, let's say. So you can actually measure the light, the photons. It's low level biophoton emission, but you can measure that. And when we see somebody that's in a meditative state, what's happening is actually there's a slowing of, let's say, required energy to sustain. And because of that, you actually give off less light. And that may sound counterintuitive, because we always want to be these light beings, but actually you want to hold on to this light. You want to hold on to this energy.
This is what those yogis have been teaching.
Okay, so
your pranic vibration, so you can be a laser pranic light force in the world.
Exactly.
You
and
have
so
to contain it first. You have to be able to understand it and manipulate it and harness it within you.
Keep it, don't lose it. Yep. And use it in ways that you want. But we're measuring this now. So we can actually measure biophotonic emission of meditators is less than of non-meditators, or even in meditative state versus non-meditative state. So it doesn't have to be a chronic meditator, but we're showing this stuff. So science is getting there and starting to confirm all these things. And I think as we go, and as our measuring equipment and our understanding gets better from a scientific level, we're just going to continue to see this more and more. So we can either, just be obsessed with science and wait for the confirmations, or we can just like listen to these people that have been saying this stuff for thousands of years, practice it, get the benefits of it. And as the science comes out, go, oh, that's cool. I've been doing that it does work. And this is why. That's really cool. We can talk about it now on a podcast, right? But the practice is where it all comes into play. Like, forget the science. You can study the science. And I know a lot of these people, they study all the science, they know all the stuff, but they don't do any of the practice. And you got to practice it, because that's where you really start to see the benefits, right? And, one of my favorite sort of analogies is to, people ask what psychedelics are like, or what Kundalini is like, and all these different sort of things that you can sort of change and alter your state. And they want to know about it. And what I say is, it's like, look, it's like asking, a blind person, or it's like describing the color purple to a blind person. What are you going to say? You know, how do you describe purple to a blind person if they've never seen purple? So it's you have to get in there, and you have to feel it, you have to know it. And when you can know it, then the science makes a lot more sense. So I think that is, to me, the key. You can't just look at the science and intellectually understand this stuff. It doesn't really do any good. In fact, you don't need to know any of the intellectual side. You just need to understand how to get into it. And this is where the practice comes into play. So it's fun stuff.
I'm still learning the intellectual side every day.
The intellectual stuff's fun, but you know, I basically like to call it mental masturbation, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what it is. It's fun, but it doesn't really do much.
It's smoking an ego, which is a good thing to have.
And it creates confirmation, right? So for me, being sort of highly left-brained, you know, it provides more of an anchoring tool to say, you know what, like there is science behind this, and it's been taught for thousands of years, you know, probably should start doing it, right? And so it just kind of provides a little coolness factor, and gets a little the intellectual part of you in there, and it is fun. You know, it's fun to see what's coming out of the science, even though we don't fully understand everything yet. It's definitely moving forward.
Yes, Jason, if you could provide the audience one thing that they have to know, what would that be?
Oh boy. For me, the thing that's been the biggest tool for me is experience. So it's not about knowing, and from a mental standpoint, intellectual standpoint, then the knowing, it comes from experience. And what we're lacking right now, in my opinion, particularly in the West, is experience. We have all the information in the world. You can learn anything you want for pretty much free, you know, but what you can't get anywhere is somebody else's experience. You can't steal that. You can't learn from it. You can only get a glimpse of it. But until you experience it yourself, it just kind of remains this illusion, this thing that's floating out there that you can't grasp. It's a ghost. So to me, practice everything that you are interested in. Get into it, experience it, and let that be your guide. Let that be your teacher, because the wisdom comes from experience. This is the kind of the point of living life. You know, if I said to you, you know, I can make you, one of the things I talk about is longevity and health through our old age. But if I said to you, you know, I can make you 105 years old right now, would you want to do that? And you'd look at me like, no, that sounds stupid. But I'd say, no, but you get longevity, right? But you get to have a really long life. And you're like, well, yeah, but the whole point is to live the life, right? So it's a very obvious sort of thing to say, but we forget this practice, we forget this in practice when we talk about meditation, when we talk about yoga. The whole point is not to get good at yoga or get really good at meditation. The point is the practice. The point is that it's the going through it. That's it. So forget the end result of things, forget the destination, forget the knowledge and the acquiring of things. Acquiring knowledge is stupid, and even acquiring experience is stupid. You want to experience it. You want to go through it. And that requires being in the present moment. It requires mindfulness. It requires understanding about how precious every day is. And then it requires taking action and just doing the things that you love. So to me, if I could encourage more people to just start taking action in something, anything, artwork, yoga, talking to their spouse, like take the action, don't learn about it, you know, do things and let the experience guide you and have fun with that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you if they want to work with you directly?
They can find me at humanlongevityfilm.com. I'm no longer taking any more clients. I'm sort of stepping away from that and going into the more education space, but all my stuff's on humanlongevityfilm.com, and they can find me on Facebook. Human Longevity Project is the name of the film that we just put out, and they can find me just by name, I'm sure.
Well, amazing. Well, thank you everyone so much for listening. Jason, thank you again so much for being here. Go over to the comment section, make sure you give us some love and some feedback. And until next week, this has been Embodied Enlightenment.